Out of their schools in the Western Cape are beginning to embrace transgender pupils. Now, they're being encouraged to protect members of the LGBTQI community from bullying and discrimination. And several schools are allowing transgender pupils to wear uniforms that they're more comfortable in. While clinical social worker Ron Addinall from the University of Cape Town joins us from our Cape Town studios this morning. He's assisted several transgender pupils. Ron, a very good morning to you, and thanks for your time and very interesting discussion. And it is progressive. It is very positive news as well. Just give us some idea on the road to actually getting here and how we actually have had schools come to this point in the Western Cape where they embrace transgender pupils and the discussion that led to this.
Excellent, thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for the invitation and for having me, and good morning to your viewers. Well, the journey to the point where we are now, where we actually have schools and principals and educators that are embracing their transgender learners, I mean, it starts with our wonderful liberal constitution that protects the rights of all of our citizens, including our LGBTQIA citizens. And in the last while, the particular focus on acknowledging and the visibility of transgender members of our population. With regards to transgender children, that is an area that has developed more recently. I would say in my experience as a practitioner, probably in the last 6 or 7 years, where I have been approached more and more by parents who are recognizing their transgender children. We are also informed by the World Professional Association of Transgender Health Protocol. They have a standards of care that already from 2011 has taken the position if a transgender child is appropriately assessed, it is recommended that they are allowed to have what's known as a social transition, which means they get to live the gender they experience themselves to be. And it is ideal that they are afforded the opportunity to do that in all areas of their life, including in the school environment. So I was approached a few years ago by a number of parents and began the negotiation in schools with the principals, with the educators, to facilitate the opportunity for our transgender learners to be able to live out their true, authentic identities in their schools.
Now, Ron, I would imagine that this is a process that involves several people. I mean, someone like yourself, yes, the school, the parents of that child. You also have to it's not just that child you have to think about. You have to think about their classmates and their schoolmates and their parents. So that's quite a thing, and that's quite a long and quite a deep conversation to have.
Absolutely, and definitely, and to support what you're saying, it is a process. Firstly, it's about the assessment of the appropriate child. There's a lot in the news at the moment, and there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. So the point I made earlier is the first stage is to assess that the child is appropriate. A lot of young children explore their gender. A lot of young children play with gender. So we're not talking about your young child and children that are going through the normative stages of just gender exploration and gender experimentation. There are a particular proportion of children that would meet and normally it's a multidisciplinary team that's involved in the assessment, where we determine that this child in particular fits the criteria of being transgender. Kind of the three terms often looked at is a child that persistently, insistently, and consistently asserts that they are not the gender that they were assigned at birth. And often there is clear indicators that this child is distressed, and after the team has assessed that this child is appropriate, only then is the recommendation made for that child that a social transition is indicated. At that point in time, we then approach the school environment. Just to highlight a particular issue we have at the moment, presently in South Africa, we do not have a National Department of Education policy with regards to the transgender child in our school environment, and that's a project that needs to be prioritized and developed. Presently, I'm very much still dependent when I approach a school for a learner as to what the principal's position is. So if I have a school where the principal is open, informed, willing to be supportive, I'm able to negotiate, or I might find resistance. But we then begin with the principal. I do psychoeducation with the principal. There's psychoeducation with the teachers. We will then bring in the parents. We'll do psychoeducation with the parents. And then we'll also do psychoeducation with the learners in the school to develop and establish the environment in which this transgender learner is then able to safely live out and explore their social transition.
And I think, I mean, I would also imagine, Ron, that some of those challenges are a bit easier to overcome in terms of the uniform or calling the child now by a different name. What about things like when it comes to change rooms, facilities, things like toilets, male, female toilets, toilets for girls and boys, also, you know, sports teams? How do you work around that?
Well, that's the, you know, this is the irony of this particular field is, you know, as complex as it is, somehow the conversation always ends up in the toilet or in the cloakrooms, I must say. But actually what our experience here in the Western Cape has been is that actually those are challenges that can be dealt with very practically. I'll never, if I can give a shout out to the principal at Pinelands North, when the parents asked her this question, if it comes to bathrooms and when it comes to cloakrooms, not all boys and girls are comfortable, you know, changing in front of each other, etc. So often the decisions and the planning is very practical, and it's often discussed with the learner about how to appropriately facilitate or use those facilities. It really just takes adult practical thinking a lot of the time. With regards to the sports teams, the recommendation is that you do allow the transgender learner, once they have socially transitioned, to be allowed to participate in the sports teams of the gender that they have socially transitioned and are living.
All right, thanks very much, Ron. A very interesting discussion, partner. And it'll be, I'm very curious to see what will happen in other provinces, other schools around the country when it comes to this issue. Hopefully the Western Cape setting an example.